Red one. Gaga. I'm sorry, it's our first Christmas episode, and I couldn't help but pick a non-Christmas song. Anyway, welcome back to StillerBros the movies.
So, this last week's been quite the year, hasn't it?
Yeah, it feels like we just spent 4 hours cleaning up a bunch of lighter fluid that our fussy toddler started pouring over everything, and for some reason the majority rule was to give him a box of matches now. Wonderful. But this whole show is basically about escapism. We're going to try to focus on that.
Even though we have a movie in 2025 that we're probably going to at least have to touch on it.
But we're going to immerse ourselves in the escapism for this as much as we possibly can, and we hope you'll join us for it.
Yes.
But for now, let's talk about a movie that is just kind of weird.
Yes. Red 1. Now, this movie's been in the works for a couple of years, and it was actually supposed to come out last December, but due to the union strikes over last year, it ended up having to get pushed, so it got pushed to this year. And with that push, it also weirdly got knocked from just something that was going to be dumped on Amazon Prime to a movie that's actually seeing a theatrical release.
So, Red 1 is yet another movie that is Dwayne Johnson's attempt to get as many franchises as he possibly can. Only this time, the gimmick that would make it different from, like, say, The Fast and the Furious, or Jungle Cruise, or literally any other movie that he's been in over the last, 10 years, is that this one is a specifically holiday-themed one.
Yes, this time around it is Christmas, focusing specifically on Santa and Krampus lore.
And also doing that thing that a lot of Christmas specials and movies do, where they're like, hey, let's modernize Santa somehow. And in this particular case, kind of going with the idea that I think Dwayne Johnson is like some kind of enforcer for Santa Claus or something like that.
Yes, and coming along for the ride, we have Chris Evans, who is doing the shtick that he's been doing pretty much since he hung up the shield as Captain America, and kind of being a little bit of a jackass.
And then there's J.K. Simmons playing Santa Claus for the first time since the last time he played Santa Claus 5 years ago in Klaus, a movie that pushed things so emotionally that I swear to God it tried to kill me through dehydration. You cannot stick that many cry scenes together without something in between.
Yeah, it's quite something, but it's also an amazing movie, so there's that.
And then also Bonnie Hunt's for the first time in God feels like forever.
Ever since she did her talk show a couple of years ago, because I guess she wanted to turn her persona in her sitcom into an actual thing for a minute.
It just feels like it's been forever since we've seen Bonnie Hunt in something that's not a cameo in a Pixar movie.
We also have Lucy Liu in here. I don't know who she's playing, but she's on the poster.
And basically the idea seems to be, well, it's a Christmas movie, so they only have a handful of ideas, so basically Santa goes missing and this group of people needs to go and find him before Christmas falls apart.
Yes.
The director is Jake Kasdan, who is mostly known for Walk Hard, the Jumanji sequels, Sex Tape,
and Bad Teacher. But we've talked about Jake Kasdan previously before. Obviously, we liked the Jumanji movies.
And this is obviously him working with Dwayne Johnson in a way to essentially say, hey, we've worked together pretty well. Let's see if we can make another action comedy that's not necessarily beholden to the nostalgia that is Jumanji.
Instead, we're beholden to the nostalgia that is Santa Claus.
But
the ultimate nostalgia, really.
But it's really kind of an interesting thing of, okay, we're doing this, we're trying to make it a kind of a franchise, but also you almost get the feeling that Amazon has a lot of faith in it, but also not a lot of faith in it, because on one hand, it's in theaters. This is going to actually have a box office take and not just, well, the streaming numbers said.
No, yeah, like they've had Amazon's had this year a couple of minor hits with their stuff, like Jackpots or Brothers, where these are direct-to-Prime releases that didn't exactly do well critically, but did pretty well on Amazon Prime themselves.
Like, I don't think Amazon Prime is mostly known for its movies. I think it's mostly known for the series that it makes, but mostly because the series that it makes are pretty top-tier stuff, like The Boys and Vox Machina, Invincible, Has Been Hotel. I'm naming a lot of animated stuff. I'm going to just change course and go with like Jack Ryan and Alex Cross. There, I named some live action stuff. I don't just watch cartoons.
But I think part of it is just because the merger between Amazon and MGM was coming together around the time that the strikes were coming in. So it might very well be because they now have a bigger theatrical arm to work off of.
Like, the fact that MGM and Amazon are now merged is probably not going to change a lot, but it is definitely going to make it so that Amazon suddenly has a much bigger movie catalog than it had before. Like, they can have Challengers and The Wizard of Oz. They don't have Wizard of Oz, and Challengers is on MGM Plus.
Yes.
They're just making up streaming services at this point.
Clearly. But at the same time, when this merger was announced, people were happy about this because it would preserve MGM's film catalog.
Though, of course, people were also skeptical about it for the same reason that everyone should always be skeptical when two companies merge, because it's like, hey, things are going to change significantly on how the company that basically got absorbed works, and also people are going to lose their jobs.
Yeah, but this is interesting for seeing what Amazon and MGM are putting out into theaters, because we know they're probably also going to end up doing some usual streaming service stuff where Amazon Prime is going to have like a Money Penny show or something, or whatever MGM brands that they could franchises that they could possibly milk a series out of.
They already lost Wednesday. They're going to need to figure out a way to filter something into an Amazon Prime series.
Yeah.
So that was quite the tangent. So Red 1, the review scores are not great, but it's mostly fluctuating somewhere between like 33 and 36, so it's not like fantastic.
But we're kind of just hungry for some escapism, to see like a dumb Dwayne Johnson action comedy movie.
If that's what we get, that's fine, but it's also just a case of, this is a 2-hour Christmas movie, and usually when movies like this happen, it's kind of like, oh, you expect like an hour and a half, or even like 78 minutes or something like that. But
I mean, the last shot we had at a Christmas franchise was like 2 years ago with Violent Night. And that was what? 90 minutes?
Something like that. But, which, for the record, I really liked Violent Nights.
Yes.
For a diehard in a Christmas situation with Santa Claus, who's actually basically a Viking, that's pretty amazing. And David Harbour kills it as a depressed, alcoholic Santa Claus who just runs around and kills people. But here we've got Santa Claus as played by J.K. Simmons, and J.K. Simmons is actually remarkably muscular for a guy his age.
Yeah. So he's played Jack Santa, and unlike last time he played Santa, where he was heartbreakingly wholesome.
We're going into weird places, and we're mostly talking about anything but this movie, but I guess that just goes to show how little research we've jumped ahead on in this movie.
Yeah.
I say we call it before we go into any more tangents.
Yes.
So we'll see you guys after the jump. So, Red 1.
It was fun. It was nice. It was a nice little family film.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say no to seeing it again, but it's also just kind of one of those things where it's like, I don't feel like my world was changed by seeing this.
I mean, it's got a lot of the usual cliches of the family film and
the action film.
But let's get into it a little bit more.
So let's start with the good, obviously. The actors are doing a lot of work to make this script really work. Like somehow Chris Evans is able to play a convincing, underhanded dealer as well as he was ever able to play Captain America.
I mean, I'm never going to say no to Chris Evans. He's one of my favorite actors right now. I will love seeing him in anything. So obviously, I always love seeing Chris Evans. Dwayne Johnson is just playing a Dwayne Johnson role. So
but when it comes down to it, this is very serious Dwayne Johnson. Like, he's not going around quipping. He's not like being the hard ass. He's just like, I'm going to be completely serious, and when I smile, that's when you know that my character arc is complete.
Yeah, this is a very much let's get down to business kind of Dwayne Johnson character.
Basically, Chris Evans is mostly there, so he has someone to play off of, to basically be like I'm the bad cop, he's the good cop.
Yeah.
And so we've got that. J.K. Simmons is reminding you a lot of the fact that he has an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor, and then it almost makes you remember that it took way too long for him to get any kind of Oscar recognition.
Like right now, the only thing I thought of every time he was on screen is, can J.K. Simmons just play Santa forever?
In fact, honestly, my favorite part of the entire movie, probably hands down, was the end of the movie where we actually get to see Santa in action. I would have watched a whole movie of that.
Yeah, because it's a lot of the same kind of Santa lore we've gotten over the years with. You get a little bit of Prep and Landing, you get some Arthur Christmas, you get some of the Santa Claus.
You get a little bit of everything.
You get freaking 'Twas the Night.
But you also get J.K. Simmons' like very unique physicality being brought to the role, where he just kind of is able to be this more athletic Santa Claus who still very much has the characterization of Santa Claus as this wonderful, forgiving man who has seen the good and the bad in humanity and still feels that the good should win out in the end.
Yes, and then at a time like this, we kind of need that.
And Lucy Liu, Bonnie Hunt, they're both pretty good in this. I don't think they got nearly enough.
No, it feels like we should have had more with those two.
Lucy Liu is supposedly the director of like this like mythical creature protection agency, and we kind of get nothing with her until the like final action sequence, and it's like the end of the movie before we find out that Mrs. Claus is technically supposed to be running this control room at the North Pole, and I'm almost like, I wish Bonnie Hunt had more screen time to justify this cool new girl boss Mrs. Claus.
Yeah, because we were thinking about it in the theater, this might be the first time I've ever seen that Mrs. Claus is running operations, which seems
way more sense than just Mrs. Claus is sitting around baking cookies for Santa.
Yeah, like she runs the whole operation. Santa's the face, but she runs the operation. That makes too much sense.
Once again, I'd see a whole movie of just J.K. Simmons, Bonnie Hunt, and Dwayne Johnson running Santa Claus stuff. But we get the rest of this movie, which is a typical actioner movie, and like I think my biggest weakness is like the script, and I hate to say this for a Chris Morgan script, but it feels like there's too much in this.
Yeah, Chris Morgan, of course, most notable for the Fast and Furious franchise, wrote the script for this, based off of an idea from one of Dwayne Johnson's producing partners. And
it just feels like there's a lot. There's a lot of lore, a lot of story, a lot of character development, and I don't think it's juggled well. And
really, the thing I think it needed to be more schmaltzy.
Yeah, I feel like they they were leaning a lot on the action and not so much on the adorable family movie aspect that they were clearly trying to go for in certain scenes.
Like, it had heart in some places, but it needed more of that.
Like there's a scene where Chris Evans and his estranged son finally come to terms with everything that they've dealt with over the years, as they've been kind of sort of estranged, and it's all just kind of okay. I don't particularly feel one way or the other about this.
We get to the end of the movie and we see this moment, and it feels like that should have been more earned. Like, it all makes sense from a story perspective, from a character arc perspective. It all just falls into place.
But it also kind of feels like we're just checking boxes on a Christmas movie checklist. Okay, here's the part where we have the big turn. Here's the part where the sinner gets his redemption and everything like that. Here's the part where Santa comes in and saves the day and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and also just kind of realizing it, I don't think Chris Evans and Dwayne Johnson's chemistry was all the way there.
Like, it's kind of trying for a buddy cop thing. Like I said earlier, it's good cop, bad cop, and everything like that. But it just doesn't feel like these are two guys who are learning to like each other. These are just two guys who happen to be in the same room some of the time.
It's similar to Hobbs and Shaw with Dwayne Johnson and Jason Statham, but Evans and Dwayne Johnson just aren't clicking into place the way they did Statham and Johnson did. Part of it might just be the fact that you have Dwayne Johnson as the straight man, and his attitude doesn't necessarily change that much by the end of the movie.
Also, we should probably point out, this is the second time that Chris Evans has basically taken one of Tim Allen's iconic roles and made in a more serious style action movie out of it. Because there's a lot of Santa Claus 2 in this movie.
It is the villain's plot is basically the Santa Claus 2.
And it's just kind of weird sitting in the theater realizing that. And then the final action sequence comes, and it's the heroes fighting the person who's trying to steal Santa's sleigh to make all the naughty people in the world pay, no matter how minor their crime. And one of them is hanging off the front of the reindeer.
Like, it's playing out exactly like the third act.
Beats for beats.
Playing out the third act to the Santa Claus 2.
The only difference is that there is no love story in this. Which, I'm going to give them credit for. It would be way too cliche to suddenly just shoehorn in a love story between Chris Evans and someone, or Dwayne Johnson and someone.
No, it's like, this is Santa Claus 2. They're just the villain's just not quipping at Chris Evans as he's making his way back to the sleigh as he's hanging onto the reindeer.
It's just kind of funny. And Kiernan Shipka, I'm sure she's doing very well. Maybe one day she'll be able to play a role that's not a witch.
Maybe.
But for right now, she was fine, but
there should have been more with her.
But she gets practically nothing to play with.
She's basically a C-tier Marvel villain in terms of characterization.
It's like she's here because we need a villain. They didn't create much dimension for her. Like, I get the idea that she's like this witch who feels justified in making sure that the righteous will overcome everything, but it's also just kind of like, okay, but you don't really give her much of a motivation in the way of that.
Yeah.
And then I think another thing to talk about is the CGI. Like, it's fine. I don't want to make the animators feel bad because I know that they work really hard, sometimes with really tight deadlines. Sometimes they're brought in at the very last possible second to clean everything up.
Oh, look at that. Another chance to bring up the fact that we stand with TAG and the Animation Guild needs to be fucking heard before they go, so that they don't have to go on strike.
But I think the compositing wasn't that great. There are a bunch of action scenes in here where I'm very aware that Dwayne Johnson is standing on a green screen.
Yeah.
And like I said, I don't want to crap on the animators. I understand what they're going through. They are working on tight deadlines, sometimes at the last second, all that kind of stuff. But it's just kind of weird when Dwayne Johnson is supposed to be riding on a snowmobile, and I am very aware that the backdrop behind it is not actually moving. But on the other hand, the makeup effects, when we get into an entire sequence full of basically random characters from The Dark Crystal and Labyrinth all playing a professional slap game.
Like, it's just so much cool creature designs and prosthesis, and there's like little details on them that just work. Like, I love practical creatures. So I will never hate that kind of thing.
But it's almost enough to make you forget that it almost looks like they just took the castle sets from the second Jumanji sequel and just basically redecorated it a little bit for this shit hot.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Red One has its moments, but I don't see it becoming the holiday classic that they were clearly aiming for.
I mean, it'll probably do better when it drops on Prime.
Yeah, it's one of the. Yeah, I mean, I recommend at least checking it out if you already have Amazon Prime. this isn't an if you have Prime, just get Prime just for this kind of thing. But it's very much a case of if you already have Prime, maybe check it out. Maybe it'll.
It's the kind of movie that will probably do better once it's once it's on streaming and people just turn it into a regular Christmas thing where they just sit down and watch it.
But I don't know if this is going to be one of those movies where if you watch it at the right age, it's going to be part of your rotation forever. It feels like this is going to be one of those ones where it's like, okay, I went through the 2 Santa Claus movies that are actually good, and
Elf,
and the first 2 Home Alones, and Christmas Vacation, and A Christmas Story, and a bunch of the other good ones. Maybe I'll just try this one out real quick.
yeah.
But yeah, Red One is fine.
It's messy but enjoyable.
Yeah, there are moments, and I just wish that the moments made for a more satisfactory whole.
Yeah.
But for right now, that's it. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to this channel, leave in the comments what you may or may not have thought of Red One, and don't forget to tune in next time when I only ask you for one thing. Talk me out of it! Bye!